She signed the divorce papers, thinking he never loved her. What she didn't know, his mother lied, faked messages, and tore them apart. 1 year later, in a hospital room, a name changed everything. And when he opened that door, the truth shattered both their hearts. This isn't just a love story. It's a story of betrayal, silence, and one final chance to make it right. "You will sign these papers, or I'll make your life miserable," snapped Susan Mitchell, her voice sharp as ice. The silence in the room was suffocating. Emily stood frozen in the middle of her tiny apartment, the weight of the divorce papers trembling in her fingers. Her cheeks were pale, her eyes wide, trying to make sense of what was happening. Only 6 months ago, she had stood at the altar saying "I do" to Jake Mitchell, the love of her life. Their days since then had been full of laughter, late-night takeout dinners, and Sunday morning coffee runs. They had dreams, plans, promises. Now, it was unraveling in the blink of an eye. Jake wasn't even in the country. He was on a business trip in London, working tirelessly to build the future they both wanted. And here was his mother, standing in Emily's living room like she owned it. Not with concern, not with sadness, but with smugness. "What?" Emily finally managed to whisper. Susan tilted her head and smiled. Not kindly, but with the cruelty of someone who believed she was superior in every way. "You really don't get it, do you? My son married below his class. You're a nobody, Emily. A small-town schoolteacher with no pedigree, no wealth, and no family. My son has a future in politics. He needs a woman who can stand beside him, not someone who shops at discount stores and packs homemade lunches." Emily's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "Jake doesn't care about that." Susan scoffed. "That's what you think. But he's already losing focus. You're a distraction. You've already taken enough of his time. Now you'll sign these, cleanly, and leave. Quietly. No mess." She stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "And if you don't, I'll ruin you." Emily looked down at the papers again. She couldn't even focus on the words. Her hands shook. "This doesn't make sense. Jake wouldn't want this." Susan smirked. "Oh, you mean these?" She pulled out her phone and held up a series of screenshots. "Texts. From Jake. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I rushed into marriage. She's not who I thought she was." Emily's stomach dropped. No, it couldn't be. Jake loved her. He had told her that just 2 weeks ago, when he kissed her goodbye at the airport. But now, these words. She stumbled back onto the couch, feeling her world collapse. Susan's voice softened, falsely sweet. "It's not personal, dear. You're just not part of our world. Sign the papers. Take the small settlement. Walk away." Emily sat frozen. No one had ever made her feel so small. No one had ever made her question her own worth. And worst of all, no one had ever made her doubt Jake, until now. She picked up the pen. Her hand trembled. But in her mind, she remembered the way Jake had once held her hand at the beach, the way he defended her to strangers, the way he laughed at her terrible cooking, the way he whispered, "I want forever with you." But that Jake wasn't here. Only Susan was. And her presence, her power, felt overwhelming. With one final look at the papers and one final prayer that somehow Jake would understand, she signed. The moment Susan left, the silence became deafening. Emily sat on the couch staring at the papers, now signed and sealed. A few tears trickled down her cheek, but she didn't sob. She didn't scream. She just sat there numb. She had no idea where to go from here. Her apartment felt like a prison now. The photos of her and Jake on the wall felt like lies. The wedding dress in the closet, still unboxed from the cleaners, felt like a cruel joke. She packed her things slowly over the next few days. No one came to check on her. No one from Jake's family. Not even Jake. That hurt the most. She told herself he must be busy. That maybe the texts were real. That maybe she'd never really known him. And so, on a rainy Thursday morning, Emily Carter disappeared from the world of the Mitchells, quietly, just like Susan had asked. Jake returned a week later. Tired but excited, he dropped his bags at the airport, took a taxi straight home, and rang the doorbell of the apartment, only to find a young couple moving in. "Excuse me, where's Emily?" he asked, confused. "She moved out days ago," the woman replied. "Said she was breaking the lease early." Didn't leave a number. Confused turned to panic. He called Emily's phone, disconnected. Her email, no reply. When he got home to his family estate, Susan greeted him warmly. She left, she said simply. Said she was done. You were right about her after all. Jake frowned. What are you talking about? You said you weren't sure, that you rushed into things, that she wasn't right for you. Jake blinked. I never said that. Susan's smile faltered. Well, maybe not exactly, but he stepped back, stunned. You showed her something, didn't you? Susan tried to deflect, but Jake's heart was already pounding. Something was wrong. He had to find her. He had to know the truth. Because deep down, no matter what Susan said, he still believed in the woman who made his world feel real. When Jake returned from his trip to San Francisco, he headed straight home with flowers in hand, only to find Emily gone. The apartment they had shared together was stripped bare of her presence. The framed photos on the wall were missing. Her shoes from the hallway were gone. The little cactus she kept on the kitchen window was no longer there. What do you mean she left? Jake asked his mother, his voice tight with confusion. She said she never loved you, Susan said, stirring her tea like it was just another calm Tuesday. She walked out without a word. She used you, Jake. Let her go. Jake stared at her, stunned. That doesn't sound like Emily. Susan sighed and leaned back in her chair. People change. Or maybe she was always like that, and you just didn't see it. She was never right for you, darling. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Emily was the kind of person who left handwritten notes in his lunchbox and made soup when he was sick. The kind of woman who once stood in the pouring rain to bring him his laptop because he forgot it before a big meeting. She wouldn't leave without saying goodbye, would she? Still holding the bouquet of tulips, her favorite. Jake sat alone in the apartment that night, staring at the empty walls. He tried calling her again, straight to voicemail. He emailed her. No response. Then he drove to her sister's old apartment, only to find out she'd moved a month ago. He messaged a few of Emily's friends, the few he knew, but they had no idea where she'd gone either. She hadn't told anyone. It was as if she had erased herself from his life. Days turned into weeks. Jake buried himself in work, trying to forget. But late at night, he kept seeing her in every quiet space, her laugh, her kindness, her eyes the last morning he kissed her goodbye at the airport. Something didn't make sense. One afternoon, about 10 months later, Jake was sitting in the waiting room of St. Mary's Hospital while his friend underwent minor surgery. He was flipping through an old magazine when two nurses walked by behind him, speaking in hushed excitement. I still can't believe she's related to him. The guy's practically a ghost. No photos, no interviews, and yet he's worth billions. I know, the other nurse whispered. And she's so humble. She teaches kids, volunteers, doesn't act like she has money at all. What's her name again? Emily. Emily Carter. Jake's head snapped up. It couldn't be. He stood up, heart pounding in his chest. Emily Carter. That name wasn't exactly uncommon, but hearing it here, in this hospital, after everything, it felt like a sign. He walked straight to the front desk. Excuse me, can you tell me where Emily Carter is staying? The receptionist looked up. Are you family? Jake hesitated. Yes, I'm her husband. A short pause. Then she typed into her computer. Room 417. But please be respectful. She's here visiting her father, who's recovering from surgery. Jake didn't wait. He rushed through the halls, barely noticing the staff around him. His heart thundered as he reached the door and paused. His hand trembled as he knocked lightly, then pushed it open. There she was, sitting by the window, wearing a simple cardigan, her hair pulled back. She was reading something, her face calm, but when she looked up and saw him, her expression changed instantly. Shock, fear, confusion, and something else he couldn't quite name. Jake, she said softly. Jake stepped inside, his voice barely a whisper. Emily. Neither of them moved for a long moment. Then a voice broke the silence. Emily, who's this? Jake turned. An older man was sitting upright in the hospital bed. Gray hair, trimmed beard, a firm yet gentle presence. He didn't look like a billionaire. In fact, he looked like someone who'd spent years working with his hands. This is Jake, Emily said after a long pause. My husband. The man studied Jake quietly. Then he extended his hand. Robert Carter. Her father. Jake blinked in confusion. But Emily, you told me your parents passed away when you were a child. Emily stood up slowly, eyes never leaving Jake's. I thought they had. My father left to protect me. He worked low-paying jobs, clean buildings, fixed engines. But he kept his distance so I could grow up safe, away from threats, away from people who might try to use me to get to him. Jake was silent. Emily continued, her voice shaking slightly. Turns out he was building something big all those years. He started a software company from nothing, worked behind the scenes, sold it, invested smartly. Now he's, well, a billionaire, but no one really knows. He kept everything hidden. Jake turned to her. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know myself until after we were already married. And when I did find out, I didn't want to change anything between us. I wanted you to love me for me. Jake stepped closer, pain flickering across his face. Emily, why did you leave? Now, it was Emily's turn to look hurt. Because your mother came to my apartment with fake texts. She said you didn't want me, that I was ruining your career. She showed me messages I thought were from you. I believed her. I had no reason not to. And you never came after me. Jake lowered his eyes. She told me you just walked away, that you never loved me. Silence stretched between them again. Emily swallowed hard. I still loved you, even after I left. Jake felt like the air had been knocked from his lungs. All this time, all the pain, the silence, the confusion, it had been based on a lie his mother created. But before he could say anything else, Robert Carter spoke. Jake, let me give you some advice. Money, class, all that. It means nothing if you let pride destroy love. What you two had was real, and that's rare. Jake looked back at Emily, tears building in his eyes. I never stopped loving you, he whispered. Emily took a step closer. Then why didn't you fight for me? I didn't know how, but I do now. She didn't respond right away, but her eyes, filled with old wounds and fresh hope, said enough. And for the first time in a year, Jake finally felt like he could breathe again. 1 year later, Jake was at St. Mary's Hospital with his mother for her appointment. While waiting in the hallway, he overheard 2 nurses whispering near the vending machine. She's in room 403. Her dad used to be a janitor. Now he's a tech billionaire. Jake almost ignored it until he heard the name, Emily Carter. His heart stopped. It couldn't be. It had been a year. A whole year of unanswered questions. A year of wondering where she had gone and why. A year of silence that never felt right. His breath caught in his throat. Without a second thought, he stood up, barely hearing his mother calling after him as he rushed down the hallway, past patients and nurses, until he reached the room. Room 403. His hand hesitated at the door. What would he say? Would she hate him? Would she even speak to him? He pushed it open, and there she was, Emily, sitting by the window, sunlight catching the edges of her hair, a small bouquet in her hands. Her expression shifted the moment she saw him. Shock, hesitation, emotion. Jake, she whispered. Jake stood frozen. She looked exactly the same, and completely different. Softer somehow, stronger. There was something in her eyes, like she'd lived 1,000 lives in the year they'd been apart. Before he could speak, the door opened again behind him. A tall man entered the room, maybe in his late 50s, with calm, observant eyes. He wore simple jeans, a checkered flannel shirt, and the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need to prove anything. I'm Robert Carter, he said, extending a hand toward Jake. Emily's father. I've heard about you. Jake stared, stunned. But, Emily said her parents passed away. Emily looked down at the floor, her voice soft. That's what I believed. For most of my life. Jake frowned, confused. Robert took a seat near the window and glanced toward his daughter. Emily was just a child when her mother passed. I couldn't give her much. We were broke. I was working 3 jobs, one of them as a janitor. There were people who wanted to take advantage of me, of her. So I disappeared for her safety, sent her to live with an aunt, changed names, everything. I wanted her to grow up free from the chaos I was in. Emily picked up the story. We lost contact. I thought he was gone forever. And then, a few years ago, he found me again. Quietly. I was still teaching, living a normal life. That's when I learned everything. Jake slowly sat down. Everything. Robert nodded. I built something slowly. Learned programming while cleaning offices at night. Took freelance jobs. Started a small app that took off. Sold it. Then another. Then invested. Now, people call me a billionaire. But I never needed the world to know. I just wanted my daughter back. Jake leaned forward, struggling to understand. Why didn't you tell me, Emily? Emily's voice cracked slightly. Because when we met, I didn't know. And when I finally did, I didn't want to change how you looked at me. I wasn't sure how you'd react. I didn't want you to think I had lied. Jake's eyes met hers. I wouldn't have cared. You might have, or your mother would have. And that's what scared me the most. Jake flinched slightly at the mention of Susan. She had never approved of Emily. Always judged her. Always looked down on her. And now, Jake knew she'd gone even further than he had imagined. I need to tell you something, Jake said, voice low. My mother showed me messages supposedly from you. And she told me you left because you didn't love me. I believed her, but something never felt right. Emily's face dropped. She came to my apartment when you were gone. Said awful things. Told me I was ruining your life. Showed me fake texts from you, saying you regretted marrying me. I didn't know what to believe. I thought I was protecting you by leaving. I thought I lost you, Jake whispered. Emily shook her head. You didn't lose me, Jake. I just didn't know how to stay. The room fell silent. Outside, a nurse rolled by with a food cart. Inside, years of silence and misunderstanding weighed heavily in the air. Robert finally stood. I'll give you two some time. As he exited, Jake turned to Emily. You know what hurts the most? He said. I kept waiting for a sign, for something to explain why you were gone. And all along, it was a lie someone else built for us. Emily blinked back tears. And I kept hoping you'd find me. Jake reached for her hand. I never stopped loving you. She hesitated, then let her fingers curl around his. I never stopped either, she said softly. He let out a slow breath, like something inside him had finally broken loose after a year of holding back. You look stronger, he said. I had to be, she replied. I had to rebuild everything. Jake nodded. I want to help you rebuild, if you'll let me. There was a pause. Then, slowly, Emily smiled, a small, hopeful smile. I think I like that. Jake looked down at their hands. I don't care about the money or the headlines. I just want you. Emily squeezed his hand. Then we start again. But this time, we write the story ourselves. Sitting in the quiet hospital room, the hum of machines in the background, Emily finally found the strength to speak. Her voice was soft, yet carried the weight of everything she had held in for a year. My dad raised me alone, she began, her eyes fixed on the bouquet of lilies in her lap. We didn't have much. Some nights, we had nothing but ramen and candles when the power got cut. But he made sure I always had books, a warm jacket in winter, and hope. Jake listened, his heart thudding in his chest. He had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways, but none of them prepared him for the ache he felt now. He worked so many jobs, Emily continued, her voice cracking slightly. Janitor, mechanic, warehouse loader. He even cleaned classrooms at night while I studied in one of them. I remember seeing him fall asleep on the bus ride home, still wearing his work gloves. She paused to wipe away a tear that slid down her cheek. Years later, he started fixing old computers for neighbors. Then, he built a small workshop. He taught himself programming. Bit by bit, he created something incredible, a software platform for small businesses. And it took off. But he never changed, never talked about it. Even I didn't know until a few months ago. Jake's eyes widened slightly. You didn't know he was? No, she whispered. He still wore flannel shirts and drove that same dented truck. I thought we were just stable now. I didn't ask questions. He never showed off. That's who he is. She looked up at Jake finally, her eyes filled with regret. I didn't want your family, especially your mother, thinking I was with you for money. So I never said a word. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not for the man who raised me. Jake felt a lump in his throat. He remembered the dinners, the walks in the park, the nights they stayed up laughing about the future. Not once had Emily ever asked for anything. She never cared about his last name, his family's money, or their reputation. She just loved him, purely. Emily's face darkened as she continued. But then, your mother came, she said, a bitter edge to her tone now. She barged into my apartment like I didn't belong in her world. Told me I was trash. Said I was trying to trap you. That you'd realized it and sent her to handle things. Jake's jaw tightened. She had screenshots, Emily said, her hands trembling. Text messages, emails, all from you, saying you regretted marrying me, that you were tired of pretending. I didn't know they were fake. They looked real. Sounded like you. And I was already feeling insecure. I believed her. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks now. I thought I wasn't enough, that you didn't want me anymore. So I signed the divorce papers. I packed my things and disappeared. I was heartbroken and humiliated. Jake was frozen, his mind replaying every moment. The empty apartment, the silence, the confusion. And now, hearing the truth, it was like being punched in the chest. He stood to speak but stopped as the door opened. Susan Mitchell stepped inside, carrying a box of vitamin water and a small bag of snacks. She stopped cold when she saw Jake and Emily sitting side by side. Her face turned pale. "Mom," Jake said slowly, his tone cold and controlled. "Is there anything you want to say?" Susan hesitated. Her hands fidgeted nervously as she placed the items on a table. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I'm sure you didn't," Jake replied. It might have made lying a little harder. Emily turned her face away, breathing deeply, trying to steady herself. Jake looked at his mother with restrained anger. "You made her believe I didn't love her," he said, every word deliberate. "You broke us apart. For what? Your obsession with money? With control? With status?" Susan's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Jake stepped closer. "Do you even know what that did to me? I searched everywhere. I blamed myself for months. Thought I'd done something wrong. I almost gave up on love completely." Silence hung in the room like a fog. Then Robert Carter stood from the chair in the corner, his posture calm but commanding. Dressed in jeans and a worn button-down, he didn't look like a billionaire, and yet his presence silenced even Susan. "I've been quiet long enough," Robert said, his voice firm but not angry. "People think money makes someone valuable. But I built a tech empire from the same hands that once scrubbed bathrooms. Trust me, money doesn't make you important. It only reveals who you already are." He turned to Susan. "I know you're kind. I used to work under them. Always looking down. Always deciding who's worthy of respect based on the car they drive or the name they carry." Susan tried to interrupt, but Robert held up his hand. "You thought Emily wasn't enough. But she's more than enough. She's kind, strong, principled. She teaches children how to dream. What have you done other than try to tear down what she built with love?" Susan's face flushed. She stepped back, visibly shaken. For the first time, her icy pride began to melt under the weight of truth. Jake turned back to Emily, who was now quietly crying again, but this time not from pain, from release. "I didn't stop loving you," he said softly. "Even when I thought you left me. I never stopped." Emily reached for his hand. "Neither did I." Susan left without another word, and as the door closed behind her, something in the room lifted. Jake turned to Robert. "Thank you." Robert smiled faintly. "Don't thank me. Just don't waste what you've been given." Jake nodded, then looked back at Emily, gently squeezing her hand. "I don't care who your father is. I never did. I love you for you. The woman who stays late for her students, who sings to calm herself when she's scared, who always gives more than she takes." Emily smiled for the first time that day. Then, slowly, she whispered, "Maybe we're not broken. Maybe we're just unfinished." Jake leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. "Then let's finish what we started." And in that small hospital room, surrounded by the quiet truth and the warmth of forgiveness, something real began again. Something stronger. Something that would never be broken by lies, pride, or status ever again. 6 months later, the soft light of a Vermont morning bathed the garden in gold. Dew still clung to the grass, sparkling like diamonds beneath the early sun. Rows of white chairs lined the trimmed lawn, decorated with wildflowers. Not expensive orchids or roses, but daisies, sunflowers, and lavender. The kind of flowers Emily used to press into her books as a little girl. Everything about this day had been planned with intention, with heart. Guests filled the space quietly, respectfully. There was a gentle murmur of conversations, of laughter and soft footsteps. Children from Emily's school, the same kids she had read stories to, stayed after hours to help, and hugged when they cried, played near the garden's edge. Their giggles floated in the air like music. Reporters, invited only on Emily's terms, stood at a respectful distance beyond the hedges. No flashy cameras, no chaos, just long lenses and notebooks, trying not to disturb the sacredness of the ceremony. This wasn't a spectacle. It was a homecoming. Jake stood at the altar beneath an arched trellis of wood and ivy, his hands folded tightly in front of him, fingers trembling slightly. He was nervous, but not from fear. It was the kind of nervous that comes from knowing you're about to step into something precious, permanent. He glanced out at the guests. Familiar faces nodded back. His childhood best friend, the high school football coach who once yelled at him, his college roommate, even a few of Robert Carter's business partners, leaders of billion-dollar firms who had traded their suits for light cotton and flip-flops just to respect the day's easy, humble feel. No one was here for business. They were here for them. Everyone had come. Everyone except Susan. "I won't support a woman like her," she had said months earlier, standing in the kitchen of Jake's apartment, her arms crossed in defiance. "She's beneath us. Her father's money doesn't change where she came from." Jake had only said one thing before showing her the door. "No, what's beneath us is judging someone like that." And that had been the end of it. He hadn't begged. He didn't plead for her to reconsider. Because Jake had finally learned that real love doesn't ask for permission, especially from pride. Now, standing here beneath the summer sky, he didn't feel her absence. He didn't need her approval anymore. Not when the woman walking toward him had already given him her heart once, and was brave enough to give it again. Then the music shifted. Everyone turned their heads. Emily appeared at the garden's entrance, framed by trees and sunshine, in a simple white dress that fluttered slightly in the breeze. She didn't wear diamonds or pearls. No veil, no glittering crown. Just a single silver bracelet on her wrist, the one her father gave her when she graduated college, and a soft smile that said everything. Her dark hair flowed down her back in loose waves. Her makeup was barely there. But to Jake, she had never looked more beautiful in his life. Maybe because now he knew the battle she had fought, the pain she had hidden, the strength it took just to stand here today. And beside her, proud and steady, walked Robert Carter. The man who once mopped floors for a living now wore a tailored gray suit that still somehow felt humble on him. He didn't puff his chest or strut. He simply looked ahead, holding his daughter's arm with a quiet strength that moved more than a few guests to tears. As they approached, Jake couldn't stop smiling. Emily's eyes met his, and for a long second, everything fell away. The noise, the crowd, the months of separation, it all faded. There was only this moment. Only them. When she reached him, Robert gently placed Emily's hand into Jake's. "I'm trusting you," he said softly. "Not because of who you are, but because of who you choose to be." Jake nodded. "I won't let her go again." Robert smiled faintly, then stepped back to take his seat. The officiant cleared his throat, but Jake and Emily didn't look away from each other. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like they had never been apart. Vows were exchanged beneath the swaying trees and open sky. Jake's voice cracked as he spoke. "I stand here today, not just because I love you, but because I see you. The girl who fought through lies, who believed in kindness, who walked away to protect her dignity even when it broke her heart. I didn't lose you. I just had to fight to deserve you." Emily blinked away tears, her lips trembling with emotion. "My love for you never left," she whispered when it was her turn. "Even when I thought you had. I chose to walk away because I thought that's what you wanted. But deep down, I always hoped you'd find me again. And you did." The guests were quiet, hanging on every word. Some dab at their eyes. Even one of the reporters behind the hedges was seen wiping his cheek. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Jake leaned in slowly, deliberately, as if making a silent vow all over again. Their lips met, a kiss not of passion, but of quiet redemption. The kind that says, "We made it." Applause erupted across the garden. The children cheered. Confetti made of wildflower petals floated through the air. Robert stood and clapped, his eyes misty. Even some of Jake's family, who once took Susan's side, stood now with smiles and respect. Emily turned toward the guests, her face glowing with joy. Jake held her hand tightly, not possessively, but with reverence. Because now he understood something. This wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about names or legacies or social status. It was about truth. About two people who had every reason to give up and didn't. About rebuilding something that had been torn apart by pride and deceit, and choosing, again, to believe in love. That night, as lanterns lit up the garden and the children danced barefoot in the grass, Emily and Jake sat side by side beneath the stars. No cameras, no microphones, just two hearts, finally at peace. Jake kissed her temple and whispered, "Thank you for giving me another chance." Emily smiled, her head resting on his shoulder. "No," she said. "Thank you for not letting go." And somewhere, far from the glitter of headlines and social expectations, a new love story began, rooted not in perfection, but in grace. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that were broken and still found their way back. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful video. Thanks for watching.